What's going on, everybody? You're listening to the Hill Shadows podcast. My name is Jeremiah, and with me, as always, is my beautiful wife, Ashley.
Hello.
How's everybody doing tonight? Hopefully you guys have had a great week, and getting ready to have a great weekend. It's been a pretty crazy week. I've seen a lot of damage this week from the flood that happened over the past week. There's been a lot of raining here in Kentucky, and my dad owns some property in Owsley County. We got a video up where we had stayed in a remote cabin. Well, that's the cabin we stayed in, and there was a little bit of damage up there. Thank God the cabin itself was still intact, and there was no damage done to that. So a lot of people lost everything they had, and it was just really sad to see. So I'll put some photos up that I took, and maybe even show some video that I recorded while we're rolling the podcast. This is our 12th episode, which is pretty cool. It means we've been going for 3 months, right? This will wrap up the third month.
Yeah.
So congratulations to you.
You too.
If nobody else tells you.
Right.
If you guys haven't, hit that subscribe button if you're into the unusual, the paranormal, high strangeness, that type of thing. That's what we do here. And if you have any stories you'd like to share, you can contact us at hillshadowsky@yahoo.com. That's right, I still use Yahoo. Just to hear from you guys, because it was easy to set up. So if you guys want to share anything, you feel free to send that in. It's been a pretty crazy week. There's been a lot of rain. I'm really tired of the rain, ready for some sunshine, but it seems like we're either having a drought or it's flooding. It's one of the two. It just can't be. No moderation at all. I haven't really heard any kind of news about anything too crazy, and this week I figured we would just kind of stay on track with what we're true to, and we just find some stuff about some Kentucky folklore, and in particular Central Kentucky folklore today, to be exact.
No.
Well, for today, right? Or
No.
Not for you. Well,
No.
for me, I wanted to share something from Central Kentucky, and I didn't realize there was as much
No, there's a lot.
folklore in my area as there is. There's a lot more than I thought. Like, I'd known about Little Egypt, I think, which I didn't realize that was as popular as it is. Like, that's a pretty well known thing. But I didn't know, like, the middle school, I had no idea that was haunted.
I mean, I went to school there. If I'd heard anything about it, I don't remember. It's been a long time.
But there was one place that I do remember going when I was in high school. And I remember a lot of people would go there. And I'll share a picture of this place as well. It's a really cool looking house. And I never really heard any specific stuff about this place. I just always heard that it was haunted, and
it looks like it is.
The place was abandoned when I was in high school, so we would just kind of go there, and I remember.
I believe it's been bought now, though, right?
It has, yeah.
Maybe
I remember going in the basement, and there was a wheelchair down there, which I thought was kind of spooky.
It is. Personally,
I never seen anything while I was there. I was there with a pretty large group of people, so I doubt anything would have made itself known. But I didn't realize the Richmond Register actually ran a story on this place, and I'm gonna share that with you guys tonight, cause why not, right? It's in my hometown. It's something that I always grew up hearing about. I personally wanted to know more about it, and so I'll share this story with you. This comes from an article in the Richmond Register from October 29th, 2015.
The title.
And the title of the article is The Haunted History of Richmond. And it starts off like this. During late October, thoughts drift toward the spooky, creepy, and unexplained. Touring haunted house attractions has been a pastime for centuries, but what many people do not know is that Richmond has a vast history of very real, unexplained places and events. Events that will leave even the most skeptical mind believing that something not entirely human could have been responsible. Many people attribute the reported prominence of spirits in Richmond to the Civil War battles that have been fought here, or to the belief that Richmond is built on an old Indian town. Regardless, the stories presented are odd, unexplained, and sometimes right down frightening to the people who witness them. 905 West Main, Westover Terrace. Now, this is the home I was talking about. Owners Jamie and Graham Nichols have been residents of Richmond since 1979, the year I was born. For years, they established themselves as part of the community. Graham owned Nichols Auto Service, and Jamie worked at EKU, Eastern Kentucky University. After retirement, the couple decided to give in to their love for old things. They would buy and renovate the house that Jamie had been eyeing ever since their move to Richmond. The house was then owned by what is now Combs, Parsons, and Collins Funeral Home. The funeral home had acquired the property in 1995 with the intention of moving their business to this historic location. The business relocation never happened, and the Nichols bought the property in 2005. After 7 years of remodeling, the Nichols moved into their dream home. The Westover Terrace property has been reported as the site of a Civil War battle. Bullets from the era have been found in the yard, and possibly a graveyard from the war. Originally, the property was owned by Cassius Clay and was given to his granddaughter, who then sold to Dr. A. Wilkes-Smith. Smith was a professor of physiology at EKU, as well as a local Richmond dentist. He and his wife built the house in 1881. Remnants of the Wilkes-Smith years still remain in the house, such as recipes that the servants had written on the walls for quick access. During the renovation, the Nichols covered the recipes in clear acrylic to preserve them. Oddly enough, one recipe was for poison. Once a grand structure with a garden, the Nichols have been told was landscaped by the legendary designer of Central Park, Frederick Law Olmsted. Sadly, over the years, it had fallen into disrepair, with its roof having caved in several sections. It had also become a regular spot for kids to go get a spook, hang out, and otherwise be up to no good. I wouldn't say all that, but you know. A pentagram had been painted upstairs, several of the plastered walls had been smashed, and many of the stained glass windows had been broken. Every fireplace, mantel, and radiator in the house had also been stolen. "We didn't know what we were getting ourselves into, but we had a dream," said Jamie after recounting how they had to clean several inches worth of chicken feathers out of the room that is now their kitchen. After purchasing the house, Jamie went online researching the property's history, only to discover that her new home was listed as a Kentucky haunted location. Graham was the first of the two to be made a believer. He was at the house alone, boarding up the windows and doors to keep intruders out during the renovation. While working on one of the room's doors, he heard what sounded like a sledgehammer strike an old stove that was behind the wall where he was standing. Soon after, it sounded as if someone or something was moving the stove across the room. "I just dropped all my tools and took off running," Graham said. Every time the contractors or they themselves were in the house working on the roof, there was banging and crashing sounds. Many contractors quit after experiencing the sounds. One of the many sounds was much like a spring being wound up, followed by a large gust of wind inside the house that Graham could only compare to standing on the interstate and being passed by a large truck. Other accounts include footsteps on the porch and the sound of a stick being scraped along the porch spindles when no one is there, and a door that unexplainably is slammed on Jamie in a visitor's hand. Friends have reported not being able to catch their breath at a certain location in the house that is occupied by a dark stain on the floor. "We would always try to say, oh, it must be this or must be that, but there are just some things you can't explain," said Jamie. Another story was of a young man helping Graham do some basic work around the house. One day he was working on the rather shambled staircase when he heard a small little girl's voice say, "Watch your step." At first, he brushed it off, thinking it was the Nichols' daughter Victoria, since they were often coming and going from the house. Half an hour later, while in the dining room with a broom, he heard the same little voice ask, "Why are you sweeping?" He looked up to see a small shadow about 2 feet take off down the hallway. That's when he realized that the voice was not Victoria. After doing some research, the Nichols found out that the Smiths had a young female family member named Elsie who had died at the age of 5. They began calling the small figure Elsie. the tiny ghost made another appearance when Graham and some friends were working on one of the upper rooms, cutting through some plaster in an area that had not been opened since the 1880s. One of the young men present went flying 6 or 7 feet across the area, yelling, "Somebody kicked my butt and pushed me." According to the Nichols, nothing like that has ever happened again, but it spurred them to begin joking that Elsie must like the young ones, since most of the time young men were whom she made an appearance to. Maybe that was because she simply wanted someone to play with. About a year ago, Elsie was seen again. Victoria had brought 3 children home with her, whom she was babysitting, and had taken them upstairs to see the house. While there, the 4-year-old little boy had taken a small fall and claimed that a little girl named Elsie had been the one that pushed him. Stunned and a little frightened after hearing Elsie's name, Jamie asked Victoria to take the children, leave, and go get ice cream. While Victoria was putting the children in their car seats, the little boy asked her, "Why can't Elsie come out for ice cream? She said she had to stay in the house." Victoria called her mom and told her what the boy had said, and Jamie requested that she ask the child what Elsie had been wearing, upon which he replied that she was in a white shirt that went all the way to the floor. The Nichols believe now that the ghosts realize that the house is not going to be torn down, and that most of the banging, crashing, and things flying across the rooms has more or less stopped since the construction has been completed. The ghosts are no longer as disturbed. Elsie is not the only ghost believed to be in the house. Men's footsteps and voices can often be heard murmuring through the walls. An older girl was also heard screaming by the contractors when they were sawing. At least one of the ghosts in the house must be a prankster, because once the Nichols were attempting to reattach the top board of the bottom staircase step. After replacing the step, they came down a few days later to find the step removed and laying beside the staircase. This happened a couple of times, and finally Graham decided to use a hydraulic nail gun to attach the step. This time the step went missing and has never been found since. The stories continue for the Nichols family. They have experienced everything from finding a real human bone underneath the closet floorboards along with some jewelry and shoes, to old Bible verse clippings mysteriously floating down from the rafters. The family will still hear a loud jarring that randomly happens, making them feel like something is slamming into the house. Despite all the paranormal seeming occurrences at Westover Terrace, to the Nichols it just seems like home. They have made peace with the ghosts and have no intention of ever leaving their dream house. Through them, this unique historic property has been saved and has found new life, possibly in more ways than one. The Wilkes-Smith House is located on 905 West Main Street in Richmond. However, this is a private residence and should be respected, so those interested should only view the home from the road and look up the history and local records. Dr. A. Wilkes-Smith's grave can also be visited in the Richmond Cemetery. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. I'm glad somebody moved in and saved the home. It's an absolutely beautiful house.
It really is.
Just for the record, nobody I was with ever broke anything or drew any kind of pentagrams. I am not with any kind of devil
What years
worship,
was
man.
this?
That's crazy.
When
They moved in? They moved in and what did I say? Was it 2005?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I picked up a date.
They brought it in 2005, absolutely.
So
and they remodeled it for 7 years before they moved in. So
the funeral
from 2005 to 2012, they renovated.
That would have been pretty cool for would have been a funeral home too? Would have gave it a bit more creep factor?
Yeah, it's weird. The one thing that did stand out to me is I do recall seeing a pentagram upstairs there. So that's absolutely true. I do remember some windows were broken. And they never put anything about the wheelchair in there. That was creepy. I would have included a wheelchair note. But like I said, when I was in there, the place was abandoned, pretty decrepit. It was not in any kind of livable condition. Right. So it was a pretty spooky place anyway. Just any kind of old abandoned house in the middle of the night is a.
I mean, the picture they have of it there is beautiful, but it looks even better now, doesn't it? I'm pretty sure they did a bunch of stuff to it.
Yeah, I think so.
It's really nice.
But I wanted to share that with you guys tonight. And, you know, that's some folklore from my hometown where I grew up, and, you know, my old stomping ground. And there's a couple other places, I guess, that are haunted. I suppose one of the places an old friend of mine may even be haunting. Is that I might go over that one time.
Yeah, no, I don't think you should.
I mean, you never know. I wouldn't go over any names or anything.
No.
But what do you got for us?
I don't know. I was just reading in this.
You have some
book.
Kentucky folklore as well.
Well,
correct?
I have this book about Weird Kentucky. It's titled Weird Kentucky, and it has a bunch of little
great book. If you guys are
stories
looking for a good read, check it out.
Yeah, it's good. But it's got a bunch of different stuff that's happened in Kentucky, from like Bigfoot, Goat Man, feral people, ghosts, all kinds of different little stories, or things.
I'm really
aliens.
intrigued by the feral people. I want to do that one episode. I think that would be a good episode.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I figure since we're talking about ghost stories, maybe I could...
Right, haunted places and whatnot, you know, the paranormal.
Yeah, maybe I could read something from this.
So what part of Kentucky does this come from?
Well, I guess it depends on what you want to hear.
I want to hear the good stuff, just like everybody else.
Well, that's kind of the thing about this, that it's not like full stories necessarily.
You know.
They're kind of partial stories. So this is Ghost Along Highway 25.
Okay, that's a road that actually runs right through the middle of Kentucky. So yeah, it does kind of pertain to central Kentucky. So yeah.
All right. It says, my husband and I grew up in the mountains of eastern Kentucky in a town called London. It's about 30 minutes south of here. There's some weird stuff in this area. A ghost appears at midnight on a sharp curve along Old 25 South, close to Livingston. It is a woman who appears on the side of the road, hitchhiking. If you stop and pick her up, she'll ride with you in the car as you negotiate the curve, and she even talks with you. But once the curve straightens out, she disappears. This actually happened to a friend of mine. One minute, the woman was there, and the next, my friend looked over at the passenger seat, and nobody was in it. The girl was supposedly walking to a dance at a nearby school and was struck and killed by a car. My brother, who has been on the Lexington police force 32 years, saw another roadside ghost. He was driving home late one night along Bowman's Mill Road as he drove past a culvert where a creek runs under the road. He saw a completely wet, naked woman with long black hair. She was sitting on the culvert alongside the road. He stopped his car and backed it up to see if she needed help. He asked her 3 or 4 times, but she kept her head down and would not answer, so he drove off. When he got to work the next day, he told his story to the other officers, and they told him that he had seen a ghost and that there was a story around the woman. Yeah, so that's kind of how all the stories are. They're just a bit, they're not like detailed whatsoever.
Just generalized.
Yeah,
cool.
There's something about another one on US 25. Many of the places featured in this book can be found on or near US 25, which is probably our all-time favorite road, running straight down the center of Kentucky for the entire vertical span of the state. It truly is in Route 66 of Kentucky weirdness. Highway 25 begins in Covington, right at the Cincinnati-Ohio border. From there, it winds its way to Florence, then spends the next couple of hours running alongside I-75. Well, wait, that's not... There's no stories in that.
For those that don't know, 25 is the old road, and like in comparison to I-75, which is the interstate, which runs south to north or north to south through Kentucky. Alternatively, you can take US 25, which is the old road, or the scenic route, as some may call it. So yeah, it's a kind of creepy road to be on late at night. I mean, you could, I'd imagine if there were ghosts out and about, you would probably see them on 25.
Right.
And Kentucky, has a history of through the Civil War. There were a lot of large battles fought here. A lot of people lost their lives. So
I have another little story here
yeah, let's hear it.
Cody Road Bridge.
Cody Road Bridge?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Where is this at? Yeah, where? I know it's in Kentucky, but like what?
Let's see.
Does it say like what town?
It says in Independence.
Independence, okay.
Alright, my incident on Cody Road Bridge. I grew up hearing stories about a ghost at the Cody Road Bridge, but I was never easy to scare. I have 2 older brothers who delighted in doing anything they could to make me freaked out. I was a veteran of the ghost story game when I was barely out of diapers. So, when I was of driving age and I could borrow my brother's car, it never occurred to me exactly how scared one dumb old bridge could make me. I had been out with my friends one night, driving around, mostly bored. I dropped them all off. The quickest way home, once I was on my own, involved going across the bridge. And quick was necessary, as I was very tired. As I came across the bridge, it was about 1:30 in the morning, and it was drizzling. About halfway across, the car stalled. I freaked and figured I had run out of gas. I looked at the gauge, though, and there was over a quarter of tank. Then I realized where I was. Just as it registered with me where I was, I heard a scream. It was loud, clear, and distinctly that of a woman in distress. I instinctively screamed as well. I turned the key a number of times and nothing happened. It seemed like hours, but it must have only been about 30 seconds. I screamed again. I turned the key one more time, and the car turned on. I'm having a hard time. I am so sorry. But as it did, there was an intense, bright, white flash of light. It wasn't like lightning, a flash on the horizon. Instead, it was right there, all around me, almost like it came from inside the car with me. I was sufficiently terrified. With the car started, I gunned it and got out of there. I'd been tired before, but now I was wide awake. I didn't get much sleep that night, needless to say. I didn't see any ghost woman, but I heard and saw some very inexplicable stuff. Since that day, I've been less of a cynic. I am less quick to dismay scary stories I hear, as I will always remember my own personal incident on the Cody Road Bridge.
That's pretty creepy.
Sorry, I kind of messed that up. I don't know why I kept tripping over my own words.
So that one's out of Independence, Kentucky.
I'm assuming it doesn't specifically say Independence. It just says in Independence is a railroad bridge. So yeah, in Independence.
Oh, railroad bridge. Okay.
Yeah, railroad bridge. So there's tons of stories in this right here. I just wish there was more detail and like.
Well, one I had discussed, I think maybe last time or the time before was Whitehall.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know a lot of details about it. I think I went into it a little bit generally. So there's a little bit about it in this Richmond Register article, and I'll just go over a little bit before we get out of here.
Okay.
The historic home Whitehall was built in 2 sections, the first in 1798 and the second in the 1860s. The property was originally owned by Green Clay and then passed down to his son, former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Cassius Clay. Cassius made the home what it is today, a sprawling 44-room mansion. He lived in the home until he died in his library at the age of 92. Whitehall is now enjoyed by many as a state historic home and park that includes a walking track, a home tour, and a yearly event called the Ghost Walk at Whitehall. As with many historic homes and sites, it's had its fair share of hauntings. One story dates back to the Great Depression when the home was being rented by tenant farmers who used the house not only to live in, but also as a barn. The tale goes that they even drove a tractor up the front steps and parked it in the hallway. Due to the lack of heat, the farmers used only the library and the pantry as sleeping quarters. This night, the wife saw the spirit of Cassius Clay appear to her while she was trying to sleep.
Oh.
The apparition looked down and asked her, "Why are you sleeping on the floor when there are so many fine beds upstairs?" Then the ghost disappeared, maybe because he realized that he no longer had the ability to offer hospitality as he once had. Other much more recent sightings have included a hand materializing on the rear staircase banister, a woman in full period dress walking through the fields, smoky figures that pass through people, and the scent of rose perfume that many attribute to Clay's wife. There are also many accounts of the cries and laughter of a baby in the house. Many believe this because Clay had an infant child and namesake who was believed to have been poisoned by a slave named Emily. Once a tour guide was upstairs getting dressed in a period hoop skirt costume when she felt someone over her shoulder whisper, "Pretty." At first, she thought her mind was playing tricks and continued to get dressed. At this point, she heard the voice again say, "Very pretty." The frightened tour guide ran out half-dressed. Many believe this ghost to have been Clay. Those wanting to check out Whitehall for themselves are invited to do so for the annual ghost walk. I don't know. I'm sure they'll be doing that this year if you guys are interested in that. It's something you'd be wanting to check out around Halloween. So, but yeah, that's like located at 500 Whitehall Shrine Road. If you guys are interested, or if you want to contact them, their phone number is 859-623-9178. They give tours of the mansion throughout the year, so that's something you can check out anytime. And as Ashley said, it's on exit 95, right off of on I-75. Right, it's the Boonesboro exit. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of history there. You know, there's a lot more if you want something you want to research. And you know, if you guys want to share any kind of encounters or stories you guys want us to share on our podcast, send it in to our email address, hillshadowsky@yahoo.com. We would love to hear from you guys.
Found another Gates of Hell story. Sorry.
Well, let's hear it. Gates of Hell.
I heard you talking about that earlier. You said something about Gates of Hell, about a cemetery.
I did say it's a cemetery. I thought it was crazy that there's a cemetery that is known as the Gates of Hell Cemetery. I don't think I would. That's not
never
a place I want to be buried at.
I remember as a kid, like my mom reading a book called Gates of Hell, and it's a little weird because during that time was whenever I saw a ghost in my house. That man in the hat.
The hat man. Yeah, you told me about this dude. Many other people talk about it. Well, we may do an episode on this phenomenon.
All right, I'm gonna read this.
Yeah, let's hear about it.
All right, Gates of Hell. I'm sure you've heard many tales of the Gates of Hell in Elizabethtown. This is a road, St. John's Road, that leads through a cemetery and is named the Gates of Hell because the place is so eerie you feel like you have driven straight into the underworld when you go there. I've been there many times. I've heard the stories of ghosts, glowing tombstones, moving trees, and more. But what I have seen myself is even scarier than that. Devil worship. Thank God you can stay in your car when visiting, or else I truly think I would have been a goner. This story happened about 6 years ago, the summer before I went away to college, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. My two friends and I had planned on visiting the Gates of Hell for the umpteenth time that summer. Now the funny part of the story is, my friends and I weren't scared of the Gates of Hell at all. In fact, we were heading out there that night to try to scare other kids who showed up looking for frights. It was late summer and a weekend night, so we knew there would definitely be carloads of thrill seekers to chase and flash our high beams at. Ideally, these would be girls we could later hit on after scaring. Unfortunately, our best laid plans fell through fast. When we got there, someone had strewn a bunch of wood across the road. We didn't take it as a warning. Instead, we just got out, moved it, and drove on anyway. The road and cemetery seemed particularly quiet that night. Even us seasoned travelers got pretty quiet. Then, we got scared. From across the cemetery, we saw it. The flashing of a car's headlights. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. We stopped and looked at each other. I myself didn't want to keep going, but kept quiet out of fear of looking chicken in front of my friends. I later found out that each of my friends went through the same exact thought process. Unfortunately, none of us expressed it, so we crept towards the car we had seen. When we got close to where it had been, its lights came on again. This time, standing in front of them were about 5 people dressed in black. We screamed and threw the car into reverse. As we did, we saw one of the people lift their arm up and chuck something at us. It turned out to be a hammer. It bounced off the ground about 3 feet in front of the hood as we pulled away. We turned around and peeled out. Behind us, Those freaks were charging toward us. Luckily, we got out of there. It still goes down as the scariest night of my life. When people ask about scary places, even all these years later, I offered up the gates of hell in Elizabethtown. The stories, and more importantly, the people that hang out there should not be trifled with.
Wow. So that's some straight devil worship going on there.
That's what he said.
Now I hear a lot of tales about devil worship.
But they're just dressed in black and threw a hammer? It seems like, I mean, there's nothing like...
I mean, it's got to be like just people, like, probably it's trying to scare people off more than anything.
I mean, they threw a hammer. You could have hurt someone.
Ghosts don't have hammers. That's what I know.
Right?
Probably people that worship the devil probably have hammers. Like to hammer nails and stuff, you know.
Right? I know, that's a bit odd.
I feel like it would be some type of satanic worship. Hopefully none of you guys are into that stuff.
Oh.
You know, don't worship the devil, guys. What is that? I know you got our listeners don't do that, but you know, if you see that going on, pray for these people. Pray for them. Cast blessings onto whatever they try to curse, you know. But that's interesting. I don't know much about Elizabethtown, but that's not too far from our location.
No, I know.
I've always heard stories about Elizabethtown growing up. I never knew much about any kind of ghost stories or anything, so that's pretty interesting. But yeah, we wanted to cover some Kentucky folklore tonight, and there's just, you know, it's abundant. You know, you hear stuff. There's so much more that I hear that is not documented, that I really don't have enough facts to lay out, you know, to make a compelling story for any of them. I just have such small little things, like very, very small details about haunted locations. But, you know, I try to find more about them as I go along, so the ones I do hear about, I'll be sure to bring along and share with you guys. And is there anything else you want to share with us tonight before we get out of here?
I was trying to find a story that, you know, is a bit more creepy. There's a tiny little story I can tell you about.
Well,
but
let's have Ashley share a tiny little story before we get out of here. This is actually
something that I've heard before. I didn't realize there was one in Kentucky like this.
And where is this at in Kentucky?
Princeton. It's Princeton's Gravity Hill.
Okay, I think I may.
Okay, yet another Gravity Hill exists in Princeton. In the early 20th century, a man and his sons were killed at this spot when a runaway ice truck plowed into them. Since then,
Yikes.
Visitors who brought their carts, and later their cars, to the site say the departed family's ghosts go out of their way to make sure no one else suffers a similar fate. Cars left in neutral roll uphill. It is said they are pushed by the spirits that guard the road. One of the most persistent legends is that if you put baby powder on the front of your car and are pushed uphill, you will find 3 sets of handprints after the phenomenon finishes.
Interesting.
1 large set and 2 smaller, more childlike ones.
I wonder if this has ever been, if there's any fact to the...
I do remember watching
I seen this on a show, right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
I don't know that I realized if it was Kentucky or not. Maybe it was. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't know.
But it was kind of debunked.
It seems like, I don't think it was in Kentucky.
It's like an illusion.
Right, yeah, it appears like you're moving uphill, but in reality, you're actually cruising at the same rate. You would be.
Well, no, it's just downhill.
It's an optical illusion.
Yeah.
It's interesting nonetheless. But yeah, if you guys want to check out some of these locations, I know the first one I went over was on Westover in Richmond, Kentucky, 905 West Main. It's called Westover Terrace. Now make sure you guys don't go there and aggravate people.
No, people live there now.
This is a lived-in home, but if you guys are in the area, you want to drive by and take a look, check it out. It's a beautiful home. And the other one I'd mentioned was also Whitehall. That's exit 95, Boonesboro. And the locations you were talking about was the most recent one was Princeton, and then you also were talking about Elizabethtown.
Yeah,
and that was the Gates of Hell Cemetery.
And then 25.
And then also US 25.
Yep.
And Cody Road Bridge.
Independence.
And that's in Independence, right?
Yep.
So yeah, you guys can, check those out. Share these stories with your friends or whatever. Add them to your book of Tales of the Unknown and Paranormal. Stories of High Strangeness.
Ooh, what is Crybaby Lane?
Crybaby Lane. Is that in Kentucky?
It is.
It is. All these are in Kentucky.
These are Kentucky.
Of course it is.
This is.
Do you want to share the story of Crybaby Lane before we get out of here? We'll let you take us out of here with that.
I guess so.
Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button. You don't want to miss our weekly uploads. We're going to be doing more than this, and also we're going to have this where we do it on video for you guys instead of just the audio. It would make things more interesting and make things a little more easy for me, where I won't have to edit so many pictures and stuff. So yeah, we'll let you take us out of here. You guys have a wonderful weekend, and we'll have Ashley share the story of Crybaby Lane.
Well, this one's kind of long.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Well, you talked it up now, so.
Alright. In the woods behind my grandparents' Kentucky farm was a prime horse trail I usually rode with my teenage uncle. The trail followed for a mile or so, some power line towers, and turned away from the towers and wandered back into the woods. After a while, we'd spill out of the woods onto a godforsaken stretch of dusty dirt road named Rebel Ridge. Rebel Ridge was a failed attempt to bring a housing development to the area, but there were only a couple of sad, run-down double-wides stuck out there in yards that were more like unkempt fields. It was at best a wide dirt path that cut through unused pasture land and was surrounded by woods. The trail dead ended after about half a mile, but there was one place that kept us coming back, a short trail off to one side called Crybaby Lane. It was a dismal trail lined with trees that grew at awkward angles, like crooked fangs exploding from the gums of some horrible beast's gaping maw. The branches arced toward the sky, then plunged earthward again into what looked like bony, knobby claws just waiting to pluck you out of the saddle. And then there was this pond itself at the trail's end. The water was black, seemingly unable to absorb any light above. The wind caused a ripple or wave, just black. You know why they called this Crybaby Lane? My uncle asked, in a way that told me I'd probably be better off not knowing, which meant I had to know. So he shared the story with me right there by the pond. Back in the 1950s, Oldham County was plagued by a rash of kidnappings. Babies, newborns to about age 2, were disappearing, and the police were stumped. It turns out that a group of Satanists were involved. They took the babies when their parents' backs were turned, in parks or right in their cribs in the middle of the night. Then they drove out to the county line down near Butler, hiked back to the pond, and sacrificed the innocents to Satan by drowning them in its waters. This went on for a while until one night when the Satanists were at the pond, a storm blew in. Most of them called it a night, but 2 stayed behind to clean up, just in case a hunter stumbled upon the place and got suspicious about charred inverted crosses and piles of old cloaks. It started to rain, and the guys were almost finished when one caught his cloak on something along the pond's bank. He tried to pull the cloak loose, but it was stuck fast. When he reached back to unhook himself, he felt cold, clammy flesh. In a flash of lightning, he could see it was an arm, a baby's arm, caked with pond scum, emerging from the water and holding onto his cloak. He stumbled back and screamed, yanking himself free, but also slipping and falling face first in the mud. He turned over and wiped the muck from his face, only to see, in the next flash of lightning, dozens of babies crawling out of the water and wallowing through the mud toward him. He screamed for his friend, who had noticed what was happening, but was frozen with fear a few feet away. As the babies reached the fallen Satanists, they began screaming and shrieking and crying. They grabbed the Satanist's feet and dragged him into the water. The last thing the other devil worshiper ever saw of his friend was his face, which was contorted in terror as tiny little fingers clawed at it and pulled him back beneath the black surface of the pond. The surviving Satanist stumbled into the county sheriff's office at 5 a.m., wearing a cloak and ranting about how much a vengeful a bunch of vengeful dead babies just dragged his friend into a pond. The police thought he was nuts, but they investigated. When they dragged the bottom of the pond with a net, they found the body of the Satanist, as well as dozens of pieces of ragged children's clothing. But that was it. They never found any of the kidnapped babies' bodies that had been allegedly thrown into the water. The Satanist stood trial for murder of his friend, as well as for multiple kidnappings. He could never finger any of the others. Point the finger at any other Satanists because they all went by code names. He was incarcerated in the Luther Luckett Correctional Facilities Ward for the criminally insane, where he lived with a lifelong fear of water and toddlers. It didn't matter to me that there was no record of a wave of baby murders for which alone raving Satanist was imprisoned, or that a small-town guy wouldn't know who his fellow Satanists were. That can all be explained away with stories of media cover-ups and attempts to protect local families. What did matter was that my uncle told me that if you listened real close on moonless nights, you could still hear those babies howling and crying. And if you were unlucky enough to be in the area, especially during a storm, they'd come up from the pond's bottom and pull you in with them. After my uncle made like he was going to throw me in a couple times, we rode on. I vowed never to return anywhere near Crybaby Lane, but of course, a few weeks later, I took some friends there, told them the story, and made like I was going to push them into the water. We all laughed until we realized it had become silent at the pond, broken only by the occasional frog croak or sudden chorus of grasshoppers. We hauled ass away from the water as fast as we could without looking like we were scared. Okay. Years passed and my grandfather eventually sold the farm. I forgot about Crybaby Lane until I was in a junior in high school and fell hard for a girl I'll call Jay. I found out she lived on Rebel Ridge, which must have been built up in the years since I'd been there. When I told her the grisly story, her mouth twisted into a sly smile and her beautiful dark eyes brightened. You know what we have to do? I did, and it pained me to think about it. We were going to spend the next new moon night on Crybaby Lane. The afternoon of our campout was cloudy and overcast. But rather than being dark, the whole world was cast in a sickly silver light. When we arrived at the trail, the light grew increasingly ashen, and the trees seemed a lifeless brownish gray. It didn't seem this freaky the other day, I heard Jay say. We set up camp on the banks of the pond with two companions, a stoner guy named Scott and his girlfriend. We built a little fire, passed around a couple of cans of beer, and generally had a good time. Even when I trotted out the story of Crybaby Lane to remind everyone while we were there that night, it didn't seem as horrifying as it did quaint. Campfire dying, beer exhausted, and the mood properly set, Jay and I excused ourselves to our tent. Time passed well, and I was thinking everything about the night had turned out perfect. Then I froze. The woods, which had been filled with the sounds of fauna in the area, had gone completely silent. You awake? I heard Jay whisper to me. It's so quiet out tonight. Yeah, I was noticing that. And then it wasn't quiet anymore. There was a tremendous plop as something leapt into the pond, and then another plop, and then a third. I did my best to remain calm, but I could hear that Jay had gone rigid lying next to me. I could hear Scott and his girlfriend whispering to one another in their tent. Scott, you awake? I said in that strained manner, I guess you would call it yelling in a whisper. Did you just hear that? His voice called back. Probably frogs, I said. There was another splash, and then a weak gust of wind that carried on it the foul smell of death. It may have just been sulfur, but isn't hell supposed to smell like sulfur? Then I heard footsteps in the dry bed of leaves that coated the ground. Jay and I did our best to get dressed without making a sound, as if that would fool anyone into thinking our tent was empty. The footsteps got louder, and I put my hand on the hilt of my folding campfire knife. Whatever was there was right outside our tent, shuffling through the leaves. Then something brushed against the thin fabric of the tent. It was low to the ground, just above baby height, and it wasn't alone. There were several somethings out there, and I could hear them scrounging about and splashing in the water. One of the somethings let out a terrible, inhuman yip. And though I heard that yip before, years ago, and other ones answering in the woods, my mind snapped right then and there into a determined, if not entirely sane, decision. I grabbed Jay's hand tight and leaned close to her. We're getting out of here. Together. If she disagreed, she didn't voice it loud enough for me to notice. A something now leaned against the tent and left a couple of imprints on the nylon that looked to be just the perfect size for baby hands. They were up a little too high, but that didn't matter at this point. "Scott," I yelled suddenly, "get the hell out! Get the hell to the car now!" The four of us stumbled out into our tents and ran blindly down the trail at top speed, dove into the car and collapsed, out of breath and completely free of wits. Whatever had been at our campsite either didn't follow us or was maintaining a very wary distance. I heard what I thought was just me laughing, half hysterically, and I realized it wasn't me at all. It really was the woods, or something in them, laughing at us in high-pitched, raspy yelps. We ended the night driving to our friend's house and spent about an hour banging on her window before she opened it up to let us in. Our tents and assorted gear sat back at the pond for 3 days before we went back to collect them. I hear Crybaby Lane is nothing more than a memory now, a victim of human expansion. There are no more ancient trees or blackwater ponds full of murdered babies seeking revenge. There are a lot more houses back on Rebel Ridge now, though I hear they're still having problems with wild dogs.
That was creepy. The little baby hands. Little babies. Man.
Yeah, but it seems like a bullshit story, honestly.
Maybe it is, and maybe it's not.
When they
If
got out
you're
the tent,
ever
what did they see?
out on Blue Ridge Lane.
No, Blue Ridge.
Blue Ridge, right? Blue Ridge. Crybaby Lane.
Is that what it was called?
Yeah, Crybaby Lane.
Yeah, it's Crybaby Lane, but I don't remember what it was. It's Rebel Ridge.
Rebel Ridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rebel Ridge, Crybaby Lane. Watch for the babies.
I mean, what was there? They got out of the tents and ran.
Clearly, it was the babies, man. The babies was.
Well, they didn't see the dang babies, and I got out running. Get out of here.
Anyway, thanks for tuning in with us, guys.
Y'all have a good
Until
one.
next week, we'll have some more interesting stories to share with you guys. Hit the subscribe button and share with us or contact us, hillshadowsky@yahoo.com. We'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.